Good morning, High 10 George Realty. Thank you for attending the training session at our new time. It will be at 11 a.m. each Friday. And we will go over things that are pertinent to your business. And also just to remind you, for the next couple of months, we will stay a half hour after the Monday meetings to go over any items that you need. Somebody requested the listing agreement last week, so I went over that. We're open to training on any of the forms. And I will always have something ready, but if there's something you need, just bring it up to me and we'll be sure and incorporate that training. So right now I'm going to share my screen and get rolling on this training session. Okay, let me get everything adjusted here so I can see what I'm doing. Okay. So today, I'll go over the grid, and we've done that a lot, but I want to do a different approach. I want to go over some of the paragraphs, because I know for me, like I know that's in the paragraphs, but let me find it. So I'm going to go over some paragraphs. We're only going to do half of the contract because it's too much to absorb in one day, and show you where to find the pertinent information on the paragraphs. I can do the grid on the Friday half-hour training, but today I want to get to the meat of the agreement so that you understand where to find things, what makes this an as-is contract, things of that nature. I think it's very helpful to know where to find the paragraphs that you can refer to. Everything's not so cut and dry and easy to answer just by pointing at a paragraph. However, it will help you. And if it's a more complex question, we're always here to help you through your transactions. So first of all, I'm going to start on paragraph 5. That is, I believe it's, page 4. So the initial deposit, I've underlined here that the deposit method, if you've checked anything other than wire transfer, if that type of deposit that you were going to give to escrow is unacceptable to them, it will revert to a wire transfer upon the escrow holder delivering notice that they need it that way. So just be aware, if you were trying to do a personal check or a cashier's check, always check with escrow first, because they may not accept that. Generally, they want a wire transfer. So retention of deposit, here it's referring to the liquidated damages paragraphs. If it's initialed by all parties, it will be incorporated into the agreement. Okay, so we all know that, but I just wanted to point out again, I think we've touched on this in training, and it's really bolded and clear here. Before you add any other clauses specifying a remedy, such as release to the a direct release or forfeiture of deposit, or making the deposit non-refundable to the buyer. You need to make sure that those are stipulated properly, because any such clause, if you add more writing into those liquidated damages, can deem it invalid if it doesn't satisfy the civil code requirements. So the best approach is to be a real estate agent. If you're not an attorney, please don't try to write like attorney or act as an attorney. It says right here that it can be deemed invalid if it does not follow the requirements of the civil code. So for me, it would be pretty hard to write like a lawyer and following the civil code. So we recommend you do not make any amendments to that liquidated damages clause unless an attorney has assisted you with that. A real estate attorney, I should say. So all cash offers. So that automatically means that it's not contingent on the buyer obtaining a loan. Because I'm so particular, even if I see that it's an all cash offer, I still will counter no loan contingency, just because that's how I am. I just want to make it crystal clear when they've checked that box, because sometimes people will check that box and then they'll try to obtain a loan. So I always want to bring in, even though the agreement says it, I always say no loan contingency. So the first loan, it always converts. It's always conventional financing unless you check the FHA or VA box. And if that's the case, or seller financing, then you're going to need the FHA or VA a mandatory clause document, which will populate if you check the box. Okay, and it says it right here, and it's CAR Form FVAC, and that shall be incorporated into the agreement should it be an FHA or VA loan. So it's always going to be conventional unless you amend the offer otherwise. The other thing that we've talked about a lot, but here's the paragraph that references it. If you provide a credit without checking with the lender, you could be going over the lender allowable credit limit. So whenever you're providing a credit, whether it be for closing costs, maybe they're crediting closing costs in lieu of repairs, but any amount, go ahead and check with the lender because you do not want to leave money on the table, because it will only allow up to the amount of the lender allowable credit. So should you have overshot that, unless you have another written agreement, it's not going to automatically adjust the purchase price. By say if you were over by $2,000, it's not going to adjust the purchase price. So you always want to be aware of that and make sure you're contacting the lender to see how much lender allowable credit, and that's the paragraph to refer to. Okay, so the buyer stated financing. So the buyer is going to pursue financing specified in the agreement, or they may elect to pursue alternative form of financing, and the seller has no obligation to cooperate with the efforts to obtain any financing other than what is specified in the agreement, but the seller is not to interfere with closing the deal. If they can close the deal without alternative, the seller should not be interfering in that. So that's right here, in case you needed to know that if you were ever discussing that with somebody. So occupancy, I like this one because it's reminding you that the buyer does intend to occupy the unit and it shall be vacant at time of possession. Now, you may not know as a buyer's agent that there's somebody in the property, whether it be a relative or a tenant renting a room or whatever. So if not, then it's instructing the seller to disclose to the buyer if there's any occupants other than the seller, and to go ahead and attach a TOPA form as part of the counteroffer. So remember that, listing agents, if you know that the buyer may not know it writing their offer, it's telling you right here that the selling agent, the listing agent, needs to provide a TOPA. Okay. And if something happened where you forgot on the counter offer, you need to do that ASAP, because that could be a determinant for a loan.
Seller should explain what these mean.
Yeah, they need to provide it right away, because it could impact a loan, or it could impact the decision of the buyer, because we've all had those weird deals where somebody was left in a property, at least I have, and that was very stressful. But it ended up working out within a couple of days, but still, we want to avoid all that. So listing agents, if you know, even if it's an uncle or relative that's there without paying rent, if they're not on title, they are a tenant. So you need to disclose that, because that TOPA form protects everybody. There's a lot of good information on it. I can pull it up another day and show you. Condition of the property. So here's where this is an as-is contract, unless otherwise agreed upon. Says right here, unless otherwise agreed, the property is delivered as is, present physical condition at the time and date of acceptance. So the seller should be maintaining that property in the same manner as when the offer was accepted. So this is, because I always get questions, well, where does it say it's as is? It's 7B. This is an as is contract. So you can always point to that and make sure that you understand it. Now, if you agreed to something else through an RR, of course, that becomes negotiable through a request for repair, but this contract on its own is an as is unless you agree to some repairs. Okay, so except as specified in the grid, seller is not responsible to repair any holes left after removal of wall hangings, such as pictures or mirrors. brackets, nails, or other fastening devices. They also need to remove their debris and personal property by close of escrow, which are not included in the sale. So they give you some information. If they don't remove it, it becomes abandoned, and that the new owner needs to give the previous owner a 3-day written notice. But a lot of times I've come up on properties where there's debris left and the agents have worked it out and had it removed, even if the previous owner provides a little cash to get a truck out there to remove it. So just make sure that you're always advising your clients to get rid of the debris and all personal property. Don't leave old paint there unless they've wanted to keep it because it belongs to the house. Make sure that you're courteous and get the property cleaned up the way it should be delivered, or advise your clients. So here they have just an advisory that the buyer is advised to conduct investigations of the entire property in order to determine its present condition. Why? Because this is an as-is contract. This is extremely important. So they're even giving you an advisory there. So contingencies and removal of contingencies. We're talking about the loan in Section 8A. If there is no appraisal contingency, or the appraisal contingency was waived with the offer or removed, then the failure of the property to appraise at the value doesn't give you a right to cancel over that, okay? So they have it big and bolded here to kind of warn you, even if don't remove an appraisal contingency unless, it's a cash buyer that tells you, hey, if it's a little under, I don't mind. But for protection of your clients, I always recommend you have that appraisal contingency in place, unless it's an investor that instructs you they don't need that, okay? And they're paying cash. And then here they're telling you that the buyer is advised to investigate the insurability of the property ASAP. So that's an important clause there. Normally you have 17 days to provide to make sure you have insurance. You may want to amend that to 20 days on the grid. But as soon as you get into escrow, please be helping your buyer check with the insurance agents, because this can be something that can kill a deal if they haven't been on top of it right away. Okay, so appraisal. I'm going to only address the no appraisal contingency. It's telling you right here, if there is no appraisal, then the buyer may not use the loan contingency to cancel this agreement for the sole purpose that the appraisal didn't come in. So it's not, oh, I can catch it on the loan. If it's strictly because it was a short appraisal, then you can't use that. So just be careful. I would keep both of those in play. But if it's a sophisticated cash buyer, just let them know how the contract would work. If they're sophisticated, they probably already know. Fair Appraisal Act notice, I think this is important. So the appraisal is required to be unbiased, objective, and not influenced by improper or illegal considerations. And they give a bunch of things here that are, discriminatory, really, based on religion, race, color. So they go through all of that. But down here on 3B, if a buyer or seller believes there's been an improper influence on an appraisal, they give you the place to either email or call to file a complaint. So for Fair Appraisal Act notice, the complaint arm of the government is provided right in your offer. So if something of that ever comes up, which I have not personally seen, but maybe some of you have, just point them to this paragraph so they know where to call, where to report, so that at least you're assisting them. We don't report for them. They need to take care of that themselves, the client. Investigation of property. So this agreement is contingent upon the buyer's acceptance of the condition of the property and all matters affecting the property. That's a pretty big statement. So that means check with the city, any other governmental agencies that you deem necessary, be checking make sure that you're doing a home inspection. Make sure you're doing a termite inspection at the same time. Sometimes people don't do those concurrently. I believe you should, so that if there's any issue on the termite that you know, unless the seller has agreed to pay and provided you a report for termite, please go ahead and get that done so that your client is happy with you and they know what's really going on with the property. Okay, so they're telling you again that it's contingent upon the buyer's availability and approval of cost for any insurance. Cost is a big deal because a lot of the policies, as we all know, have gone up. So that's why we tell you to start checking that right away. So review of seller documents for title. The buyer is advised to review, I like this right here. Buyer is advised to review all the underlying documents and other materials affecting title. You get the title report, the prelim. Make sure you have the one with the hyperlinks. They're usually blue. You can click them and you can print everything that's under those hyperlinks for your client. And right here, and any plotted easements. Sometimes you won't receive a plotted easement from title. They are free. I always call and ask for a plotted easement. So please, when you are representing a buyer, call the title company and say, hey, can you email me the plotted easements? It's a free service and they will email you that plotted easement. Okay, so do that for your buyer. It says it right here, any plotted easements. So the buyer has 5 days after receipt. If they receive a revised preliminary report, which happens a lot, maybe there was a switch in the buyer name, so it's going to be revised with the new buyer name, things like that. So they have 5 days after the review of any revised preliminary report to re-review it and approve it. So when you get that revised prelim from title, I'll always say, did you send this to the buyer? I just did that this morning. Hey, hi, thank you. Did you send this to the buyer? No. Okay, thank you. I'll forward it. We want to make sure that we're hitting it as fast as we can. We don't want to give extra days because we sat on it for 2 or 3 days and didn't forward it. So make sure that you are doing that, okay? To help your clients. This is a big one, this buyer review of leased or liened items. I did have a property fall out because of this. So you have the buyer's review and ability and willingness to assume any lease, maintenance agreement, or other ongoing financial obligation is important. They need to review that and make sure they're comfortable with it. They do have time in the grid. It gives them, I believe it's 17 days on that contingency too, to review that and make sure they're good with it. So really important to make sure that if there is a leased or a liened item on that property, you have all the documentation up front from the seller so that you could provide a copy of that agreement, contract, whatever it may be. And always remember that we have some old water softeners that are on a lease agreement, which I found out last year. So just make sure that you're asking the seller for those documents so that you can provide those to escrow, and escrow may provide them to the buyer right away so they can look at those. Okay, removal or a waiver of contingencies with the offer. The buyer has no obligation to remove a contractual contingency unless the seller has provided all required documents, reports, disclosures pertaining to that contingency. So that's important to know. The seller can ask that, but they'll have to have provided everything to the buyer, okay? But we still don't recommend it or that the buyer waives it because maybe they want to have their own inspection company over. Maybe they want to have their own termite company there. So this paragraph is right here that they don't have an obligation unless the seller has provided all the documentation for removal or waiver of that contingency with the offer. Okay. I'm talking fast, so are there any questions? Okay, so I'm going to continue. Removal of contingency or cancellation. Remember that if you deliver a document late, the buyer gets 5 days to review it. So don't be noticing to perform them if you delivered late and it's still within the 5 days after delivery, okay? But if you are trying to cancel because they're not removing the contingency, always remember notice to perform. You must provide a notice to perform. So we can't just cancel. We need to do the proper steps of the contract, which is first to provide a notice to perform to the buyer. And it usually gives them 2 days. Okay, so here's where that says it right here in J3. So if you look at these paragraphs, there's a lot of really good information. It gives you the steps. But like I said, some issues could be a little more complex or gray. Don't worry, even if it's something simple, we're here to help you. So don't get, too fearful or think, oh, I'm just coming back in business. You're never alone. We will always be with you. But I just want to point these clauses out. Sale of buyer's property. If that is the case and it's contingent upon that, make sure that you have provided the COP form. Okay. Number 9, paragraph 9. Items included in and excluded from the sale. I think it will behoove all of us to take a look at this paragraph because there's things even such as light bulbs that are included. You can't run around and take out light bulbs. You cannot take out curtain rods and curtains if you haven't countered those out. So those are to remain with the property. I believe that we should all read this paragraph and understand it. And it's even telling us that if there was an inclusion or exclusion in the multiple listing where they put it in the private remarks or somewhere, that doesn't flow to the contract. It has to be written into the contract, whatever those inclusions or exclusions are. So just because it said on the multiple listing service that they're including a refrigerator, you need to check the box on your offer to obtain that refrigerator. Okay, so I think that this is really important. Existing electrical, mechanical, that makes sense. But there's things that don't, that we don't think, which includes blinds, curtains, draperies that should stay, shutters, or any other materials that cover any portion of the window, any hardware, rods, things like that, TV antennas, satellite dishes, air coolers and conditioners. If there's a set-in in a bedroom, which I have had, and the seller is adamant that they're taking that set-in air cooler out, make sure that you've countered that out. Don't forget those little things. So mailbox, in-ground landscaping, water features and fountains. Make sure that if there's a water feature and the seller wants to take that from the yard, make sure that you've countered that out. Water softeners. This is where we found that there was a lien on a very old Sparkletts water softener. So make sure that you understand if there's a water softener there and things of that nature. Light bulbs, including smart bulbs. So I really think that we should read this paragraph, understand what is left, what is to be left on the property, and take care to exclude them if the seller does not wish to leave them. Okay. And it goes into security systems, home automation. So I'll leave that to you to read, but I think this is a really important paragraph for us. So leased or liened items, the seller needs to disclose to the buyer any item or system which is leased or liened, or otherwise in the sale that is leased and not owned by the seller. So like I was saying earlier, make sure you have those contracts, that paperwork, provide a copy to the buyer's agent, provide a copy to escrow, make sure that you have this with your listing. So, and then here that the seller represents that all items included in the purchase, unless otherwise agreed, are owned by the seller and are free and clear of liens. Items excluded from the sale. This is another important paragraph. Unless otherwise specified, to include them, the flat screen TVs, speakers, things of that nature. And right here, bolded, it says unless otherwise specified. Brackets attached to the wall, floors, or ceiling for any component, furniture, or item will be removed, and the holes or other damages shall be repaired but not painted. So listing agents, remember that. That has to be done, or you need to counter it that it'll be up to the buyer to repair. Okay. So that's an important one in C to make sure that you're aware that it's there, okay? Allocation of costs, inspection reports, tests, and certificates. So one portion of the grid takes care of who's going to provide the report. And there's other check boxes like, for instance, on the governmental retrofit and stuff like that, who's going to pay for the work should work be necessary. So generally, when you're representing a buyer, you're going to check for the seller. Usually a listing agent will counter that out. But again, be prepared, and you can request that work be done in forms such as a request for repair, and then the seller can respond to that. But remember, and you'll see this next week when I go through the rest of the paragraphs, this is an as-is contract, as we've already stated, and there is a paragraph that says the seller is not obligated to even respond to a request for repair. However, out of professional courtesy, we normally do, we at least tell them something, right? But the seller's not obligated to do any work unless it was agreed upon or to even respond. But I recommend responding just out of professional courtesy if the seller is willing to do that, okay? Government requirements and corrective or remedial actions. Legally required installation, like smoke alarms, carbon monoxide, strapping of the water heater need to be completed actually by the time the lender's coming for the appraisal, because they're going to be looking for these. If the seller has agreed to pay for these and make sure they're done, and they cause a reinspection because they didn't have them done, then that reinspection fee from the lender is charged to the seller. So just make sure if the seller's agreed that they have all this done. Yeah, you could counter that to the buyer, but the buyer's not inside the property, so I don't recommend you do that. But again, everything's negotiable. But if you have agreed on the offer to get that done, make sure it's done, okay? So point of sale requirements. So the defensible space compliance is determined and agreed to in the FHDS. And usually we don't supply the FHDS unless it's in a high or very high fire zone. And what's nice, your NHD report has a big bold and tells you if it's in that, okay? And here's where they're talking about reinspection fees, that the party, like if the seller caused a reinspection, then they need to pay for that reinspection fee because they didn't have the appropriate smoke detector or whatever inside the property. Okay, so here, this is a good one, information and advice on requirements. The buyer and seller are advised with this paragraph to seek information from a knowledgeable source on local and state mandates, whether they are point of sale requirements of ownership. And it says right here that we do not have the expertise as agents in this area and cannot ascertain all of the requirements or costs of compliance. So that's good to say, check with the city, those types of things. You know, always advise your clients. They can consult a real estate attorney, of course, but they can go check with the city themselves and do those things. You can direct them, but let them do the checking because that some of this stuff is not our expertise to know what the state and local requirements are. Usually, even if I don't think the city has an inspection requirement, I will either call the city or a trusted escrow officer and say, hey, let me pick a city, Bell have a pre-sale inspection requirement. So always check with that. On home warranty, right here it says that the buyer should choose the home warranty plan. So let the buyer choose. Don't try to, force them to a home warranty plan. Let the buyer make that selection themselves. Leave it as a buyer's choice. Let them choose, and the buyer will pay any, they'll usually ask for the seller to pay for some of it, but anything that goes over the amount stipulated in the agreement, then the buyer will pay the remainder of the plan, whatever exceeds the amount in the contract. So if the buyer wants to waive the purchase of a home warranty plan, we need a waiver, and the buyer can still purchase that home warranty plan at their expense prior to close of escrow. Okay? So sometimes you'll see offers come in where they've waived it because they're trying to be really competitive. They don't want to ask the seller to pay. That's fine. But if they are wanting a home warranty plan, let's let the buyer select it as the contract says. So today I'm going to conclude at this point, and I will go over the remainder of the paragraphs next Friday. Are there any questions? Okay.
Yeah, I have a question. So some properties they mentioned they don't guarantee the permit of the some room may be added by the homeowner, and also they not guarantee the square footage of the property, etc. So it is the buyer's responsibility to check it out with the city, not the buyer's agent responsibility. Is that right?
Correct. Now, if there's an appraisal, which most, I would say 90%, maybe some properties don't because it's a cash buyer and they don't care to have it appraised. But an appraiser will also measure the property. So that is a second check on the square footage at least. But yes, you're right, Helen, they should go to the city themselves and check that out. They can
So,
go and see if there's any permitting. They can ask for permits at the counter, whatever they want to do to satisfy themselves.
so those properties with the permitting issues, uh, they usually this is a big problem. Is that right? It's a lien against the property. Is that right?
Not always, no. Uh-uh. What if somebody converted a den into a bedroom, right? So, I don't foresee, there'd be a lien on that. I mean, maybe Peter would have more information on that, but, yeah. You can't just rely on the title report. You have to go to the city, ask for you can either hire somebody for $75 to pull all the permits, or the buyer can go themselves to the city and ask for all the permits on the property.
Yeah. Anyway, those informations are uh, uh, the job of the buyer to do it by
Right,
themselves.
but it's
Yeah.
also our job to be advising our buyer to do these things. Yeah,
Okay,
we
but
have a
not our job
fiduciary.
to help them figure it out.
Pardon me?
Not our job. It is not our job to help them figure it out. If
Well, it
they
is
have
our
full
job to
permit.
perform at the highest level with them, and we do owe them a fiduciary. If they
Mm,
bring back discrepancies from the city that they've collected, you can direct them to talk to a city planner. You can
mm,
direct them to talk to a real estate attorney. But we cannot act in either of those manners because that's not what we are.
okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
we have to be
Yeah.
careful, but we should help, but not take the responsibility. Point
Okay.
them in the right direction to the right person to talk to.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
you're welcome. Any other questions?
Yes, Michelle, this is Oscar Castriana. I have two questions. Well, one on the one that you were talking about right now, that you can hire somebody for $75 to do that for you. Is there a company that we can use
Yeah, there's a company that will pull whatever public permits they can find, and it's $75, and then they'll email you the package. Now, you can't 100 conclusively say, hey, this is all there is, because I would never say that. But they have an option to pay the money and get the permit package. We've done that because sometimes it's easier, or the buyer's not in the area. They don't want to do it. So they're willing to pay the $75 to have this company pull whatever permits they can find.
and do you have the name of the company at the
I
office?
do. I have it on my computer. I don't have it with me, but I can e-blast it out to everybody.
Great. My second question was about the home warranty. So if the seller doesn't want to pay for it, and the buyer doesn't want to pay for it, does anybody need to sign any waivers or anything like
Yeah,
that?
it has to be waived at that point,
By both the seller and buyer, the
by
two
the
different.
buyer.
Oh, but just by
We
the
need a
buyer,
waiver. Yeah,
just from the buyer.
yeah,
Okay, great.
yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Any other questions? Now, if there's anything you guys want addressed, let me know. I'm going to conclude all the paragraphs next week. I will go over the grid for the more newer agents on a Monday after the class. I won't do it in here because I want to get to all the paragraphs so you know where to find things. But again, if you can't find it or you don't understand it, it's no problem. We're here with you. Peter is here on Saturdays. I will answer my phone. Text me, tell me you have something going on that you need help on, and we're here to help you. So if there's no further questions,
Michelle, hi, it's me, Oscar again.
uh-huh.
Yeah, one last question. Where can we find this recording?
Oh, it's on our YouTube. I can send you the link and it goes by date. So it would be dated today. I've asked Rhett to start putting the name of the training session. So I'll send him an email today to put the date and RPA session 1 on it. So I can send you a link to our YouTube. We have links to our website and YouTube. We can e-blast those out today so that everybody can just click the link and get to those.
Great. And so today's recording might be available starting today?
It'll be available starting, yes, probably by no later than 5. Because
Great.
when Rhett does it, it's usually about 2 to 3 o'clock and it's up right away.
Okay, yeah, you will send me the link. I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. Have a nice
Mhm.
weekend.
You
Great class.
too. Any other questions? Okay, thank you all for attending. If there's anything that myself or Peter or any of our staff can do to help you, please reach out. We're here for you. And I wish you all a beautiful weekend. And we will see you on Monday. Thank you all. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.